When Cheryl asked me to speak at this event, I gotta tell you, at first I felt very unworthy. I felt that way because when you look around our room, Jim was a face in this room that everybody here knew. He was so many things to so many people that there's no way, and what I'm about to read to you, even though it's 7 pages, double and triple space, some of it bolded so I could read it, but it's just what I knew about Jim in my slice of heaven in the 22 years that I knew him. So please, as I go through this, I want each and every one of you out there to insert your story. The words that were written on the pamphlets that you picked up by one of Jim's grandsons say it so detailed and succinctly, it baffles. But some of the things that are not put on there, I guess I was lucky enough because they were things also that Jim did in this world. So without too much more delay, I'm going to get with what I wanted to tell you today. Good morning, folks. Before I get started, I would like to thank the McCarthy family for asking and giving me the honor to say a few words here. Thanks to all of you who have come here today to pay their respects on the passing of one of the Downey community's great and pioneering men, Mr. Jim McCarthy. Although I recognize and know many of you here today, for the record, like Father said, my name is Ed Delano. Don't say it out loud outside. There's bail bondsmen out there looking for me. While I have not known Jim as long as some here today, my life took a fortunate turn in early 2003, some 22 years ago, when I was at the end of my Navy career and starting my civilian career, still working for the Navy. I took a job at the dive school as their dive systems manager. I'd heard about Jim. There's a lot of people I've heard about, and a lot of them are sitting in front of me right now. They were from a community called the Saturation Diving Community. Books have been written about them. Some of them written, that shouldn't probably have been written. There's still men in this room. Dave Thompson, I know you're here. If I say the word Ivy Bells, you'll probably see Dave squirm a little bit in the back. But that was a book that was written and anybody could buy and read. It was saturation diving, it was diving at its best and its most dangerous. I was not a sat diver, I was an unsat diver. And it's funny in its saying, but it's true in its context. My life took a different turn, and I went a different path. We marched to different drummers. But when I ran into Jim, I'd already had a full career, and I was already retired as a chief warrant officer, CW04, and I took a job at the dive school, and then I got introduced to Jim, and this is where this takes off. Like many in the diving community, I had heard about Jim McCarthy, the engineer that was the primary designer of the Navy Experimental Diving Unit's Saturation Diving Facility, and also the Ocean Simulation Facility here in Panama City. The complex was built and finished in 1979. It had moved out from its earlier location up in the Washington Navy Yard. Jim was already legendary through his involvement with the famous Sea Lab program when I met him. This program took place in the late 60s and through the 70s. Jim had already amassed great street credentials. Can I back up on that Sea Lab program for a minute? A A lot of you guys, I think everybody here knows Sea Lab. You've heard about it. It was the Navy's in-your-face organization that tested and proved the things that they wanted to be able to do in areas that were highly classified. Every little bit of engineering and the things that went into those men's work was down to the last detail, and Jim was there. That's back in the days when they had slide rules. Calculators, what the heck was that? I think I had the first calculator when I went to Naval Academy Prep School. Texas Instrument cost me $86. Jim and the guys were doing this stuff on the slide rule. When I first met him, I had no idea I would witness what distinguished professionalism looked like. He first came across as just like when you first meet Jim. When he would come up and talk to you, I don't know how he did it. I think everybody here understands what I'm about to say. When he talked to you, you felt like you were the most important person in his conversation. You don't realize it until you come back to him again, if you're fortunate enough, over and over again. It doesn't matter how hard the conversation is. Doesn't matter how funny the conversation is or where you're going with it. Jim showed what being a gentleman was all about. The only other gentleman I ever graded against being the greatest gentleman I ever knew was a character named Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies. That guy, didn't matter what happened in that show, he always had the right answer, didn't he? He always treated people with respect, treated the ladies like ladies, and he gave everybody his full attention. And then I met Jim, the full embodiment of something that I had not. I've met many, many men that were worth noting, but I never met a man that did it so effortlessly. It's not like he spent time trying to figure out what to talk to you about. These men in blue here are his workmates in the business that he's left behind. I'm sure they've gotten more than his friendliness, but they've also gotten something that you can't shake off. It's something that makes every person, man, woman, children, grandchildren, my buddy in the pew there, it makes you a better person. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to figure it out, but you are a better person. These are some of the things I learned about him. One of the most that I regret the most. It never crossed my mind, but I never met his wife Ginger. I came across Jim in his life when he was my age, I am now. I'm 69, he was about 72 when I met him. He had gone through a full life, and he was busy doing what he liked to do. Robert Strong and the people from Air Power Services were his go-to for a lot of things that he did. And people that he know, all these men that work with him, they had worked in the Navy. He knew them, they knew him. But somehow, in all that, I never had the chance to have my association with Jim steer me in the direction of meeting his wife. I do know Jim loved his wife very much, and I know he mentioned her with great nostalgia and feeling, more often with her passing some years ago. I was struck by a time where my wife, April, and my son, Keegan, who's a lieutenant now in the Navy, is on a submarine in Guam. He's the weapons officer. Well, we managed to grab my son for a week, and Jim dropped everything and went on a 5-day cruise with us. I never cruised with Jim. I don't know how this guy does it. He's like freaking Peter Pan. When you say be there, he appears. We had to meet him at the cruise terminal in New Orleans, and I kept telling my wife, geez, I hope we don't have a hard time meeting up with Jim. I hadn't seen him the whole drive over. I got out of the car, walked 3 cars down, and there's Jim. It's like he dropped out of the sky. He's ready to go. He's all packed, showered, shaved, looking good, ready to go. And I had a great week with him. And of course, with my son and my wife. But I learned a lot of things on that trip. You know, when people here, when you cruise with each other, if you meet new people or you go with friends or whatever, you learn a lot about people, especially after a few drinks. He didn't drink much. I probably did most of the talking. I know he loved his wife very much. He talked about her almost every day, usually when the sun was coming up. He frequently will get into details explaining his loss. Wouldn't you know it stuck with me? I know he has a daughter, Miss Cheryl McCarthy, right here today. Miss Cheryl, along with her sons and her family members. Some of them I got to meet the other day at lunch. One of them, who struck me greatly because of his ability to do character faces. I'm hoping to see him at lunch again this week. I didn't get enough of Jim Carrey at lunch with me. I'm not kidding you, that kid looks like Jim Carrey when he wants to. I don't know if he got that from his great-grandfather, but hey, you got talent. All you gotta do is get an education. More importantly, I learned how much Jim has invested in the world and the folks around him. From that first meeting with him to the last, when I saw him just days before his passing, Jim had immediate and positive impact. He had the impact of making you, all of you, everybody, feel that you were the most important in the conversation. That was, if he liked you. I never suffered being on the side where he was not happy with me, but I was warned by others that Jim had one. He's kind of like the SEALs when they drive a boat. And when they jump in a boat, they only have 2 speeds, stop and full speed ahead. And that's how Jim struck me in life. But I never had to meter myself with him because he seemed to, I don't know if it was me or the people I hung out with or the job I had at the dive school, he seemed to come over and sit down with us periodically and just relax. And so what I ended up getting out of Jim was pure gold. Pure professional diving gold. Talking with Jim about anything was like a rare glimpse of great wisdom and caring. I found myself captured, listening and watching for each pearl of wisdom. Jim was always about trying to do the right things for the right reasons. Some of you may have heard that before. And somehow he was able to teach some of us old dogs, and there's a few of you guys that are in my not to be trusted age group, new tricks, things we needed sharpened to be better men. Jim took every man and lady and made them better, just by his association. My old boss at the school, and a very good and longtime friend of Jim's, Mr. Dave Sullivan, who's passed away, once described Jim as the Renaissance man. A Da Vinci-like man that had experienced, studied, and excelled at so many disciplines of life. That pretty much succinctly covers Jim. You look at these pictures, you read the pamphlet you were given. He did it all. I didn't see White Rhino Hunter in there. I think he missed that one. But he did everything else. He went down to South America a couple of times and just about shot every damn bird they had down there. He was a big time, get out there and get it done. But here's some highlights that maybe some of you aren't aware of. I'm talking to this Karen Ringelberg on this one because it was her husband and her husband's son that's involved. Jim was a pilot in his younger days, not just any pilot, but was once an instructor pilot. This is a guy who's going to teach everybody how to fly. At C-Store lunch, which is something I run every Friday here in town, one day about 2 years ago, the eldest son of Captain Jack Ringelberg, who sadly has also recently passed, and he was also the former supervisor of diving and salvage and the commanding officer of the Navy Experimental Diving Unit, and Jim was stationed there with him, shared with us that Jim had qualified his son as a teenager to fly. That's quite an accomplishment. You taught a teenager how to do something besides ask for dinner. Taught him how to fly. But that's not the end of the story. The son was at lunch, and he's not much younger than me. And that man went on to have a long and successful career, retiring from the Air Force as a colonel. It's an 06. As their chief test pilot. Not a chief test pilot, the chief test pilot. I'd say Jim did a good job getting a young man started. In fact, he's been instrumental in many young folks, their lives and their successes. Before that, Jim did what the greatest generation did without being asked because it was theirs to do. Something I'm hoping that we have generations coming up today that will see as their duty to do because there's nobody else to do it. And they do it selflessly. You see that with the flooding that we've had this past week in Texas. Jim was a Korean War veteran. I don't know how much of the war everybody here knows. I know just a little bit. He only gave me a smattering of detail. But he never mentioned it until I found out by accident some years ago when his daughter shared pictures with me of Jim as an NCO stationed in South Korea. He was in the hospital at the time, and not doing well, and she shared me all these pictures, and lo and behold, Jim checked himself out, and through some heavenly device, Father, he was healed. I'm going to credit you for that. But what he told me about in Korea is that when the war broke out in 1950, he was an Army artillery, he was an NCO in an Army artillery battalion. The Army guys and the lieutenants are out in the hallway, the passageway. That's a non-commissioned officer. He was a senior NCO. He was there when our forces were overrun when the war broke out. And the American forces and the South Korean forces, what little there was of them, had to make a fighting retreat. I mean, a fighting retreat down the entire peninsula of the South Korean country. This took place over months. Finally, they were surrounded in the Pusan perimeter, which is on the very southern coast, near Pusan and a Navy port called Chennai. There they made the last stand and reversed the encirclement when they got reprieve when our forces landed in Incheon, up north of them. Later in the war, Jim's unit was attached to an armored division in northern Korea, and again making a last stand to repel significant communist Chinese forces being inserted into the war to try to reverse the fortunes of the war in Korea. Jim went through two do or die situations. There was no going home. There was no sending to the restroom. None of that. Never heard him talk about it. In fact, I had to drag it out of him. It wouldn't, those people in Korea wouldn't be there if he hadn't been there, and people like him. Jim worked with, befriended, donated his time, his being, and soul to many of us here. No, not in an overwhelming biblical way, well, that would be nice, but in a more subtle, quiet, professional manner, reflecting the values of the greatest generation, which you belong to. The values of proper human discourse, something we are sorely needing today. I hope as we go forward from this room, when I'm finally through with this, that we don't forget that. He supported other philanthropic projects, one of which stands proudly in front of the dive school. Jim was one of 5 men who later became 15 or more that decided, kind of like one of those Three Stooges cartoons. You guys watch Three Stooges? You know who they are? Where they look at each other and one goes, "Hey Bo, let's make a statue." That's exactly how it happened. 5 of us, 2 engineers, 3 divers, and we didn't know the first freaking thing about making a statue. 7 years it took us, and Jim was in it all the way. The statue was designed, bought, paid for, over $300,000, and donated to the dive school where it stands today as a testament to all the people who train there and who go down in the sea to dive. You look at that statue, especially this row here, these 2 rows, I want you to think of him. Those are human hands on that statue, because humans dove those rigs. Youth athletics, I was inadvertently part of his magnanimous help. My son at the time was a high school football player at Mosley, and he'd been giving money to his city league teams for quite a few years. But this was high school, this was the big time. So I sent my son over to ask him, "Hey, can we get a donation?" And Jim asked him, he goes, "Well, how much money you got already?" Well, my son Keegan didn't know. He said, "Well, you get in your car and you go find out." So about 2-3 days later, Jim called me and goes, "Is he coming back?" I said, "Boy, I thought he's here." So I asked him, "Is he coming?" I said, "I'm trying to find out." Well, he got a number all right. He went back and told Jim. Jim doubled it. And it was significant. He made me promise and made Keegan promise that nobody would ever know. But I'm telling you, it was enough money to outfit a high school football team in new uniforms, both the varsity and the junior varsity for the rest of the year. Plus, new weights and new workout equipment. That was Jim McCarthy. He didn't know those kids. He knew one kid. But he came and watched the games. I understand he was, from what you wrote, Colby, he was quite a sportsman. So I had no idea that was a huge passion, and we were the benefactors of that passion. He supported other charities, mostly through his attainment in masonry. He was a 32nd degree Mason and a Shriner of many years. I myself was especially fortunate to be raised in 2007 to Master Mason here locally by Jim, Bob Barth, who some of you may know, and my namesake and godfather, shipmate of my dad's, former master diver and retired naval officer Edmund Bennett, the man I'm named after. He had other projects that he liked, but some of them are too many to list, but this last one I want to spend a little time on, because it's going to be for here and now and for quite a while. And that's the man in the Sea Museum. Is Steve Mulholland here today?
He is.
Steve, raise your hand. There he is. Well, you know what? I wasn't going to say anything nice about you, Steve. I guess I want to. I'm just kidding. Jim gave his substantial support for many years to the Man in the Sea Museum. And in my opinion, and many opinions in this room and around town these days, after years of struggling and struggling and struggling, Steve and his band of miracle workers are expertly managing that place like it's never been run before. It's a whole new world out there. I highly encourage everybody here to put that on your list when the grandkids visit. And most certainly for this Friday, Steve's has a celebration of life for Jim at his facility at 1500, Steve?
Yes, sir.
1500 until Steve says, I've run out of goodies, you gotta go home. But I think it's gonna be a couple hours. But it really is a sight to, I can remember way back in the day, they were just barely getting by. What a change. Jim and many other good men like him, and the crew that Steve works with, that's the reason things happen. This is what makes great men greater. In closing, yes, I miss Jim mightily. I'm acutely aware I apologize. I'm acutely aware that at 69 years of age, my mentors, and Jim was one of them, are getting further and fewer between. Yes, I mentor other people, and have been for years. But as long as Jim is here, I always have one. These times, when we all, at some advanced age, gaze into the mirror and see no older or wiser face immediately behind us, is when we start to really realize that we're it. We're the ones that have to be that face. And I'm proud of the people I see in this room because I know many of you are. You have successfully raised families. You have successfully performed in businesses. You have successfully served this country. And this does nothing more than validate the time that Jim spent on me, with you in this room. You wouldn't be here if he hadn't spent time with you. And for us to remember, when you go home today, this is not the end of Jim McCarthy or any of you. This is a continuation of what has to be done. What they teach in the Bible. Things that you can live by and still hold your head high the next day. Things that you can believe in and know that somehow it's going to be okay, even when the day's dark. I know I'm not alone in that feeling, but as a student of history, what makes great men or women immortal? What is it? What could possibly survive past our physical presence here on earth? Besides a marker, a vault. The bounds of immortality are sometimes hard to describe and attain. And I gotta apologize, Father. Some of us divers actually do think we're going to be immortal. However, I know many of us know greatness when we see it. makes Jim immortal? The same thing that can make us all immortal. In mind, in spirit, in tough times, in fun times, and in times when we are all one step ahead of the law. And some of you have some high stepping wrong. It's our lives. It's how we lived it and how we tell that story of ourselves, and in this case of Jim and his life adventures. It's in the telling by those that paint between the lines in full color and bring the situations to life, resurrecting the great personalities that surround a life well lived. All that needs to be told in fine and vivid, all this needs to be told in fine and vivid detail. Yes, I look at you today and say, Jim left a great story. Now go out there and tell it as best you can. And for all this, I thank you for this honor, Jim.